If you sit in the silence for a few minutes and you ask for wisdom or insight or the answer to your question, it will come. And all your busyness probably comes from a sense of lack, a seed thought that happened long ago that you no longer remember, but is governing your actions even now as it compiles one action upon another in the hope of getting rid of that seed thought. But there it is, it persists. And the breaking of that could be that you return and look at what that is. But if you never get to that, trust and surrender that all this is working in your favor and you have nothing to fear. Experiment with that. You have everything to trust. And I believe I'd like to continue that conversation as we pursue this book study that we're doing. The book we're doing, we have actually a few more copies in the bookstore along with the study guide. It's a small book. And I've noticed over time that this congregation prefers small books with big print. And so this book's for you. The title of the book is Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is parallels much of what we did yesterday, because much of the wisdom of this book is that if you're thinking too much, you're going to suffer. And you're going to suffer because thinking itself is the beginning of suffering. Thinking, not thought, is the beginning of suffering according to the book. And it makes a very important distinction that thought is unbidden, unefforted, and from a higher place than your thinking, which is what you do once you have the thought. Then you start chewing on it. And many times the examination that we give to it brings us down instead of bringing us up. That our machinations that we make over anything begins to be the source of our suffering. And our suffering really, as everybody has heard many times, our suffering is optional, but it's only optional if you can stop thinking. If you're caught up in the train wreck of thinking and it's plowing over and over and over the same ground and you're just in that, I'm just thinking it. How many of you have any of that or have had that? It's a really smart thing to get a handle on the thinking. Because, I mean, we need thinking. We're born with a lot of computational power. We can remember a lot of things. We can put the computation and the thoughts together, and we can create many things. But what I'm talking about is what happens when your thinking is more guided by your fear or desperation than from inspiration. And so when we're living from inspiration, according to this book, the thoughts that are inspiring the thought that comes to you unbidden or unrehearsed or unmanipulated, the thought that comes to you as inspiration, that thought is a gift. The thought that says, I've got to do this, or I will not be happy, or I've got to do this so that I can get that, so then I can get that, and one day I'll be happy, that is what they call thinking. And that comes from a place of lack, if you think about it. If you think about it, the lack is what makes you feel like you have to have this before you can have that. That where you are is not where you want to be, and where someplace else you could be happier. Any of you ever thought that someplace else you'd be happier? I know people who think when they live on another planet, they'll be happier. Some of our thoughts are rather silly. I had a friend who was a minister. He was a great guy. I love this guy. He goes, I moved to a new town. I got settled into my apartment. It was really a great apartment. I loved it. I always wanted to live in this town. I was living there, had a good job. And then I heard a knock on the door. So I went to the door and opened the door, and there were my problems. Because your problems are really... They're really self-generated, aren't they? I mean, maybe you don't feel like I do, but I feel like all my problems are self-generated. that they're self-generated and they're replicated by thought over and over and over. By reading the same situation in the same way and repeating the process again, it comes out as suffering. And the idea is that if we can stop the thought process long enough, we can open to a new thought, a download essentially from a higher place, and that will be the answer that you were looking for, and then trust it and go with it and stop being a conditioned yammer and open to something brand new happening. And so let's talk a little bit about how to cut down the amount of thinking that you do. No one expecting you to ever stop rehearsing, but to break the cycle. The primary tool for that is noticing that you're doing it. Intending to stop, but if you don't notice that you're doing it, it's just going to run rampant. There's going to be distress, there's going to be fear that's amplified. Our job as human beings isn't to outthink creation, but to find out how to flow with it. And so if we feel ourselves beginning to think too much, notice that you're doing it. Or maybe you don't even notice because it's such a habit. I want to take this a little darker. No, really. I was watching a documentary on post-traumatic stress syndrome among these elite warriors that we send into combat in foreign countries. And they had been, it was like in World War II, you went to battle maybe once every month, but these guys went every day, and sometimes more than once. And their accumulated trauma was overwhelming, and these guys are dying at the rate of 22 a day by suicide. And so this program was about a drug program that they did, which in a protocol essentially where they're very well supervised, but it's a psychological drug they take, 2 of them, and in that time what they do is they begin to have the lack of control, and they begin to see their life before them. And my expectation of that was that they would see all the horrors of war, but what they really tended to see in the end was not that, but their own childhood. It was the abuse they had felt in childhood that had become the seed thought for all the interpretation of their life. And so the reason they had gone into the military was that they wanted to be strong and tough and not vulnerable, to be the tough one, the strongest, the bravest, the most powerful. And when they broke through with this drug to the seed thought, they suffered in that moment tears and anguish and fear and all the things that they had become strong men to never feel again. And that seed thought, when examined in the care of others, broke. And it cascaded down through all the trauma they had experienced as warriors. And they came home as healthy men, losing headaches and panic attacks. And they had more to do, but basically they have begun to find a way out of it. On Thursday, we were having a book study discussion. Michael and I lead a book study on Thursday, and anybody's welcome. So if you don't have people to do a book study with and want to have a place to do book study with, come there. One of the things that someone said, they started talking about beliefs, and I was sitting there going, we didn't mean to be talking about beliefs. We were talking about thoughts and thinking. But anyway, that's the way the thing goes. And I'm ruminating on that, thinking about that this morning. And one of the things I thought was that the belief is a frozen interpretation of data. And so think of it this way. I'm using the same word many times in different ways, so please forgive me. But imagine that something happens to you, or many things that happen to you, and it's data coming in. I'm going to use a dog, so you don't feel like I'm talking about you exactly. But a dog is beaten by males several times, and when he's being walked on the leash, he sees a male, he starts to bark or to cower, right? It's a belief, it's a compilation of data that's coming into a belief that when a male approaches, bad things are going to happen. That's a belief. And one of the things we do is we don't see the world with clarity because we have on the screen of our, or on our windshield, we could say, on our windshield we have put our beliefs and taped them up there, and then we look out and we can't actually see very clearly because we have a series of confirmed ideas that we now call a belief. And I believe that's what happened with these men, is that they had confirmed beliefs that there was somehow they weren't adequate enough. They couldn't meet the day as a child, but they had carried this out as one of those fundamental ideas that had frozen in them. And that belief is something that we carry too, maybe not the exact one, but have you noticed that when psychologists go, let's break it down, what is the basic, the fundamental thing that's causing you trouble? And it always comes down to just basically a few sentences. I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I'm inadequate, I'm not smart enough. Do you know what I'm saying? Anybody here seen that? That basically when they take the neurosis that most of us live through, it comes down to some decision we made at one time in our life when we were not as capable as we are now. One time, and that was a seed thought that has boom right through their life to this moment. And it still affects how they act, even though they're now successful human beings in the world. They still have the underlying thought, I'm not enough. And that underlying thought, and anyone like that, is the foundational reason for overthinking stuff. It's about fear and protection. It's about making us feel adequate when we have it's believed we're not adequate, and we do so much of the gyrations of our life so that we cannot have that experience again. At the same time, that core thought is creating the experience of not enough because we overthink the gift of the pure thought that comes to us. And we repeat it. And so when we set up goals to have this or that and that, it's all coming out of that, I'm not enough, or I'm not lovable, or there's something wrong with me. That is pretty heavy, isn't it? And so my hope is that as we read this book and do the little tiny exercises that are in it, that it will begin to dawn on us that we don't have to go down that path. And here's the exercise that has really helped me in the last few weeks as I've been reading this book. And it's one you can do in 30 seconds. But it is essentially calm down and ask the question that you want an answer to. And then wait for the answer. And then act on that. Not after you've chewed it up through the factory of thoughts that is formed by your original belief. Don't wait for that. Move cleanly, purely toward what the thought is indicating. So essentially, as I was telling you, Richard Lang was here yesterday and teaching us easy ways to see from the one presence. And then we would flip into being the regular person and freed from the one presence in the regular person. And this is essentially the same thing as moving beyond thinking and accepting thoughts. It is moving into that state when the thought arises, it's coming from the presence, the one presence. It's coming from your higher self or your divine nature. And so when you rest in that, you feel that, and you settle into that, then there is a calm that comes through your whole being, which is quite different than when you come to your thought by way of your sense of separateness, your sense of isolation, your sense of not adequate, your need to protect. When you come from that place, the outcomes reinforce it. And when you come from this place, from the place where it is peace, love, and happiness, when you come from where those thoughts from, then what is your outcome? The seed thought has embedded in it peace, love, and happiness. It comes from it, and it returns you to it. So that's your choice. Live over here in the hopes of overcoming your weaknesses and making enough money or having enough people love you or proving that you have 5 degrees and therefore you must be smart enough or whatever the game is you've decided to play. Instead, sit in the stillness and wait for the answer. That old Bible phrase, be still and know, be still and know, it's often followed with, I am God, but you could just stop at be still and know. The answer is in the stillness, not in the hurricane, not in the earthquake, not in the windstorm. Be still and know. And so it's not hours you need to sit in meditation to have that experience. It is really close. It's there. We'll do it before we stop. I want to talk to you just about another extreme example of what can happen. So many times we are on the spiritual path, and usually it starts out good. Sometimes it starts out good. And then things get better and better. We see this when we've done prosperity classes. We tell people, open your mind, open your generosity, open your wallet, and you will find that the world is willing to pour money into it. And it really works. Until it doesn't. Somewhere down the line, it seems like everybody hits a wall. And the same is true, I think, in all spiritual practice. When you're deepening, you have the gifts that remind you that you're on the right path, and then comes the dark night of the soul. Y'all know what the dark night is? You lose something that's precious to you. Maybe you lose everything that's precious to you. And like Jesus would say on the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? It feels like the game just was proof positive. If you do the right thing, if you're trying to awaken, you're just going to have a happy, clean life. And you are, until you're not. So don't worry if it happens. And I want to read from this book, which is called The Heart of Prayer by Rupert Spira. He's one of my favorite writers. Rupert is a non-dual teacher, basically continually reminding people that the non-dual experience is right next to your other experience. It's right there. It's the one inside you that's always been there. And one of the things he says in this, and this is coming back to my theme of my personal theme when I'm talking to people, is trust is the key. Now Michael says it differently, but not much. He says surrender is the key. Surrender is the key. And the way I surrender is to trust. So let me read to you. In the dark night of the soul, one must sit without expectation. When you're asked, this is the same process when you want to get to the thought and not the thinking. It's exactly the same. You must sit without machinations in that case instead of expectations. In the words of T.S. Eliot, I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would always be hope for the wrong things. Wait without love, for love would always be love for the wrong things. We sit without regret or expectation. Regret takes us into the past, expectations into the future. Can you hear the echo of almost the exact same thing I said before? The seed thought, the need, when you sit and you beg and you ask, and from that place, what will you get but more of the same? When you're in the dark night of the soul, don't expect things to be easy, but don't panic. It's all working its way out. It's all going to be better. However, it's possible that the dark night of the soul may lead not to despair, but to surrender. For even this darkness is pervaded by the experience of being. Being is what Richard was teaching. Sitting and waiting for the thought to arise is sitting as being. Looking out on the world and seeing from your wholeness instead of your separation is being. However, it is possible that the dark night of the soul may lead not to despair, but to surrender, for even this darkness is pervaded by the experience of being. If I am depressed, I am present there. If I am lonely, I am present there. If I am anxious, I am present there. For even in this dark night of the soul, being shines. Being is like the sun. It cannot be extinguished. It shines brightly even in the dark places. So we've covered some waterfront here. The main thing I want you to take away is that if you sit in the silence for a few minutes and you ask for wisdom or insight or the answer to your question, it will come. And all your busyness probably comes from a sense of lack, a sense of a seed thought that happened long ago that you no longer remember, but is governing your actions even now as it compiles one action upon another in the hope of getting rid of that seed thought. But there it is, it persists. And the breaking of that could be that you return and look at what that is. But if you never get to that, trust and surrender that all this is working in your favor and you have nothing to fear. Experiment with that. You have everything to trust. Denzel Washington has a very brief reel, I think is what they're called, the little shorts. He says, you trust the bus driver when you get on, even though you don't know anything about the bus driver. You trust the pilot when you get in the airplane. But do you trust God that everything is working out? Let us surrender. Let's take a pause and let's ask the questions and hear the answer and live from that place, from the place that comes from the source of who you are. Let's do that and dial down the thinking by observing it. and trusting. Let us pray. Let's just get quiet for a moment. There must be something on your plate that you want to know, a new thought around. Perhaps it's why, perhaps it's how, or what, or when. And now surrender. Your thoughts, your ambitions, your previous ideas, just sit. And ask, and wait. No effort, just wait. No scrunched faces, no tight shoulders, no clenched fists, just wait. Who else would know the answer? Why ask anyone else? For the one presence is who you are. You're not just the body or your thoughts. You are that. So now let's sink deeper and listen if you haven't heard. And then when you hear, just be grateful. Ah, so. Ah, so. All right, all right. All is well. All right. And so it is. Amen.
I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.